and intentionally evenly mixed. What the managers had figured out was the best way to make sure that everybody worked for very low wages and that no one stood up and said, golly, I'm really tired of getting injured on the line, and the line moves so fast, and I've now had 3 hogs fall on me in the last year. Maybe we need something different. Maybe we need some protection. The way to prevent that from happening, and from a conversation with a union, which there was a really tremendous meatpacking union in the area that had been working with other plants, was to keep it such so that there would be an all African-American line and a Latino manager of that line, or vice versa, all Latino line, African-American manager, and then to be able to say to the African-American community, gosh, we could pay you more, but these Latinos, they're illegal, but we can, if you all weren't so dang lazy, came to work on time, we would not have to hire them, but we're going to hire them anyway. Conversely, say to Latinos, gosh, we'd pay you more, but y'all know that you're illegal. And even though, these folk are lazy, so you can have the work, but we're going to call ICE if you actually really keep bugging us about that raise. It took 15 years for those workers to be able to come together and have a conversation and to really work with the union and work with the company to actually win a union contract. In those 15 years, Human Rights Watch issued a report citing the high number of amputations that had happened at the plant. I became very good friends with a woman named Elsa, who shared a story of how she was recruited from her hometown in Mexico by someone who said, look, I got this great job in this plant for you. Here's your documents. Meet me at the border. We'll make it happen. Only to find out later that the documents, of course, weren't valid, and she was working undocumented in the plant. She had 6 times had a hog fall on her and lives in such constant back pain that it was difficult for her to even get up in the morning and go to work. The shift for the workers came when religious leaders from both communities were able to sit down and talk with the workers and to hear the plight of the workers and hear the workers, actually for the first time realize, I can come to church and I don't just it's more than just about coming and praying. It is more, this actually means something for me in my life right here, right now. Let the kingdom come now. And as the religious leaders and the workers sat down together, as they met with larger community organizations, the state NAACP came in, national organizations like the one I was working for, Interfaith Worker Justice, became part of this journey. And ultimately, the workers were able to work with the community, with the union, to win a contract. Doing justice, it ain't easy. But the gift is that we're, as part of that, able to not only do what the Lord requires of us, but become transformed in the process. This idea of loving mercy or kindness is interesting for me. The original Hebrew word is hesed, which is interesting because I had seen that word in many different organizations in many different places. And I never realized until a pastor friend recently told me that word hesed actually is used 245 times in the Old Testament. It is not only a deep and integral part of what the Lord requires of us, it is a deep part of the Lord, a defining characteristic of who God is. It's intriguing that there's actually no one English word that perfectly translates this word hesed. But the most complete description is this idea of a womb feeling, of creating a tenderness from intimate bonding. So when I first would read this, love mercy, my well-educated middle-class brain intellectualized that. Yes, I love mercy. Let's do mercy. Mercy is good. I think that I really believe in that. We need to be, creating lots of places for people to get the support and the help that they need. Let's do it. But I think if we dig deeper, that's not what maybe Micah was saying. What if what Micah was calling us to and what God is calling us to is a deeper journey of intimate bonding with tenderness. What if part of the call to love mercy is creating a relationship that is so close to you, it is like a mother with her child? That, to me, is what this work is about. And if you're doing justice, I don't think there's any way you cannot love mercy. That in this journey of building relationships with people through a supper club, through being able to be in the community and learning people's stories, how can you not love mercy? I spent several years with my work at Interfaith Worker Justice, and perhaps some of those challenging but blessed years, looking at how do we recreate a sanctuary movement here and now in our 21st century context. In this new sanctuary movement, as it was strangely coined, I will be the first to admit I don't love that word, but that's what it's called. It actually was not sort of this intellectual creation. It literally happened because we were hearing from congregations around the country who said, they have just tried to deport Maria, and we don't know what to do. We cannot let Maria be separated from her 5 kids. What can we as a congregation do to support her, to step up and surround her with this presence, and to say that we believe in a law that is higher than the law of our land that separates families? One of the turning points in this journey for me, and I think for many in this movement, came with this woman named Liliana. Liliana is from California. She came here when she was 19. She was one of the ones who thought that she had the right documentation, found out that she didn't at the border, was separated from the rest of her family members who did, snuck back across a few days later to rejoin them, went on to get married to a U.S. citizen and have 4 U.S. citizen children. Her youngest child was only 3 weeks old when she got a knock at the door. And an ICE agent stood at the door while literally as she's nursing her baby girl and said, "You know there's been a deportation order out for you. I'm here to take you." It's one of the few moments that I've actually heard about a glimpse of compassion in the system. And I know that there are many, because I genuinely do believe that even those who continue to create and perpetuate this system of injustice, at their core, have this place where they also can be doing justice and loving mercy. And so this ICE agent was so moved by the sight of this woman nursing her 3-week-old daughter, he said, "All right, clearly you need some time. So what I'll do is give you a week to get your stuff together, to figure out who's going to care for your kids, and I'll be back." So immediately Liliana got on the phone with her pastor, crying, scared, unsure of where this journey would take her. She called her pastor, who called a community organizer with the Interfaith Worker Justice group in California. And they decided to bring Liliana and her entire family into a space of sanctuary, which literally means, and I know many of you have been part of this journey through congregations here, but Liliana and her family took up residence in the church, at least until they could figure something out. That was 3 years ago. I'm so thrilled to say that Liliana is one of the lucky few, who finally was able to, through a lot of incredible legal maneuvers and a tremendous team, to be able to legalize her status. But what for me was really prophetic about that journey is the transformation of the congregation that worked with her. As happens in California, one of the few spaces that actually had the space to house a full family was in Ventura County, one of the wealthiest counties in California, and this major church with this massive property, who had most of the folks didn't even know anything about the immigrant journey. They agreed to take on Liliana and her family, first temporarily. She ended up staying 2 years in that space. But to listen to stories of the folk who got to know her, got to love her, got to love on those cute children of hers, they did justice because they loved mercy. They created a bond so deep that in the dark moments of that journey, when it looked like she would indeed need to be deported, when ICE stood outside the church, they stood with her. And walk humbly with our God. You know, I think in this journey, one of the greatest barriers to doing justice and loving mercy is humility. And I am the first to claim that. I do believe that sometimes we get it. You all are here today because you get it. You wouldn't have agreed to come to advocacy days if at some part of you weren't already bought into what Mike is saying. So why then is this hard for us? Why is it a barrier for us to actually walk humbly with God? Back to my moment in the bar. I have to admit that I was moments away from lying to this Australian man about what I was doing with my books and my paper. At that moment, I wanted to be giving a talk on anything but faith and immigration. And yet, I think it was a moment of remembering that I am a little piece in this, and yet an important piece. That I think the barrier often happens when we have this sense of prosperity, you know what, I am documented. I didn't give up my license, I will admit that. Partly because I wasn't exactly sure where my license was at that moment. But I will be the first to admit that I did feel this sense of uncomfortableness, of anxiety. Well, I really need to leave right after the service if I'm going to catch a plane on standby to make it back to Chicago before the snowstorm. So I cannot afford to give up my license. What if then my plan doesn't go through? Because I've got my plan. I know what I'm doing. Humility. How do we claim that we are all part of this journey? That Liliana's journey looks very different from mine. She has walked through things that I will never fully understand. And yet the same grace that applies to Liliana applies to me. I am not going to get it right. I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I may even be tempted to lie about what I care about. But in the end, I believe that walking humbly is about walking in the same direction with God. Walking on the same path with God. God goes on the road with us. Va Dios mismo en nuestro mismo caminar. That, my friends, is the gift. That we know that we are walking with God in our doing of justice and our loving as deep as a mother loves her child. I was moved as I was rereading recently a book about the first sanctuary movement and came across a passage from a man, Raul, from El Salvador. He says, "In faith, God keeps me struggling, which revealed itself in the most difficult moments of my life. It is a faith that makes itself real to the extent that I do something for the sake of all people, and in the people I meet the love of God." I want us to take a few moments now to just sit with this. When you hear these words from Micah, what do you think the Lord requires of you? Of you, Mark. Of you, Carol. Of you. What does the Lord require of you? How are you called to do justice today and tomorrow and next week and next year? What supper club is waiting to be created in your congregation? How are you called to love mercy? Who could you form a bond as close as a mother and a child with?